Hey everybody, it's EJ from EYEDESYN.com, and today I got a really fun tutorial for you all about cloth inflation, how you can use it to create cool abstract cloth inflation looks, cool text inflation, and even show you how to make a pillow. Let's check it out. Alright, so let's first begin by creating an object that we can clothify. I'm just going to grab a cube. And to subdivide this, I'm just going to place this inside of a subdivision surface. I'm going to hold the Alt or Option key down with the cube selected, and that'll make the cube a child of that subdivision surface. Now, if I go to my display, garage shading lines, you can now see how many subdivisions we have. Now, we have the subdivision editor and the subdivision render, and sometimes this trips people up as far as what they're seeing rendering versus what they see in their viewport. So we're going to get these numbers to match, okay? So now we see what is going on in the viewport, and that's exactly how it's going to look when we render. Now, you can see the amount of subdivisions. If I just make this a little bit longer, something like that, make a little cloth egg or something like that, what we can do is just subdivide this even more, maybe 4 and maybe even 5. So I'll put 5 in each of these, and we have this really nice dense mesh. And the key to having cloth have really nice wrinkles and stuff like that is it needs enough geometry to have those really nice small wrinkles. So I think a subdivision of 5 is going to work. So now what we're going to do is make this an editable object, because cloth needs to have polygonal geometry and not a generator or a primitive to be able to, manipulate these points and be able to throw the cloth-like simulation onto your geometry. So I'm going to make this editable by hitting C, and there we go. And now let me just right click my subdivision surface here, or what used to be my subdivision surface, go to Simulation, Cloth, and if we hit play, you're going to see that the egg just kind of falls to the ground. And let me just rename this to Cloth Object. And what's going on and why our object's just kind of falling to the ground is due to this gravity. Now if I just zero out the gravity, it's just going to stay in place, but it's not looking all that interesting. Now, here in this Forces tab, we have all these little wind options, and I'm not really going to use this to get to the final end result, but what I want to do is just show you to put in a wind, maybe a wind strength of, say, 0.5, and what that's going to end up doing to our little cloth egg here. You see that we have these really nice ripples, maybe 0.8, and we have these really nice ripples right there. And again, these nice fine wrinkles are all thanks to the highly subdivided geometry that we have. If we had way less polygons, we'd have thicker wrinkles and it wouldn't look as nice. So you can see all this kind of crumpling happening and stuff like that. Just wanted to show why subdividing is so important. So I'm just going to turn off that wind strength altogether so we won't get any of these kind of wind properties at all. And what I'm going to do, and what is going to really make this cloth simulation look really, really cool, is to pin down parts of our geometry that stay static while the rest of the object kind of gets affected by all those cloth forces and cloth simulation. So what we can do is go into the dresser, and you can see that we have a fixed points option. So what I can do is go into point mode, and maybe get my loop selection by going U and L. And let's just select a few loops, like maybe this loop right there. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift key to get this loop over here. So we have this kind of cool rounded rectangle kind of effect on each of these sides of our little cloth egg here, okay? And then what I'm going to do, just to store this in case I want to come back to this for later, is to go to Select and Set Selection. It'll store this point selection in this little tag here, okay? So now what I can do is go, and with those points selected, hit the set button. You'll see that our yellow dots become nice purple dots, and that means that this is now fixed as part of this cloth simulation, cloth tag here. And if I hit play, you're gonna not see anything happen. But if I go back into my forces and let's bring our wind strength in, you're gonna see now we have some nice clothy simulation, and these points are now fixed. And if I get out of my garage shading lines and get back out of my point mode, we can actually see what the geometry looks like. And you see we have these really nice ripples, stuff going on like that. Now that's all well and good. Let me just turn that back to 0, turn the wind strength back to 0. And what I want to do now, if I go back to frame 0 here, is show you the main thing that's really going to blow your mind and that makes cloth really awesome is this size parameter. Now, if I just increase this size parameter to 125 and hit play, you're going to see that everything just kind of popped out there and everything's looking pretty kind of wonky as far as the polygon edges goes and stuff like that. So let's just go and put another subdivision surface here. I got my cloth object selected, holding Alt or Option key down. See the subdivision surface is smoothing all this out. We got this really cool kind of cloth explosion going on. Now what's actually happening behind the scenes is this size option, and while this cloth is kind of billowing out, is the size option is allowing the cloth simulation to stretch the polygons that are included in the cloth simulation. So that's why we're getting all this like cloth slack or this polygonal slack that is causing all this billowing out of all of these cloth pieces, which is really cool. Now, alone, this is kind of cool. We have some little cloth intersecting going on there. To prevent that, we can go to the Expert tab and turn on this self-collision. And this will allow our cloth to kind of allow it to collide within itself and we don't get any of these kind of intersections. If you still see intersections going on, like I still see some there, you're going to see that this is really slowing down my scene too. Up the subsampling if you have a lot of stuff going on. I'm just going to turn this off for now just because I don't want you to view this kind of slow as a snail kind of simulation in my viewport. My trusty Mac Pro, new Mac Pro, chugging behind the scenes here. But this is kind of cool in itself, right? So let's go on and let's take this even further. What if I wanted to make this look like this is actually inflating? Right now it just looks like there's just some wrinkly kind of leather or something like that happening, kind of pushing out from the center of our object. Well, to do that, we can actually use particle forces like a attractor, and by itself, the attractor is just going to, if I just bring in like 5,000 to really make this show, what this is acting like is like a giant black hole. It's sucking in all of the polygons into the center of wherever the axis center of this attractor object is. And this is a little bit too much, maybe 1,500. But you can see that this is just sucking in all of the cloth. Now, what's really cool is if we place a negative in front of this number, what the attractor actually becomes is more of like a detractor, I guess, the detractor beam kind of effect. And now you can see we're getting this really nice inflation going on, okay? So let's maybe bring that up to like 2,500, something like that. So now we can start playing around, if we go back into the cloth tag, start playing around with some of these other options, okay? So let's just start by going over the stiffness here. Now this is just going, if you consider the cloth and on all of the polygons here, let me just go to Garage Shading Lines. If you consider all the polygon edges here and stuff made up of springs, and that is what is causing this nice rippling and the bouncing and stuff like that. What the stiffness does is it increases the tension of those little springs. If I bring this down to say 20%, you're going to see that our cloth can billow out much further, and it's got more give to it. It's not so, the simulation, the cloth doesn't look so tight. Now this flexion allows, if you think of like flexing a muscle, it like can bend and kind of fold in on itself. And that's what the flexion does. If I bring this to say 90, you can really see what's going on. Let me go back to Garage Shading Lines. And that's kind of like a nice thing if you just want to experiment, is just really crank up some of the values and see what it looks like with a high value. So there's the high flexing, we got all these like really big ripples and stuff like that. And then if I have a very low flexion value, what that looks like. And what I've found is that flexion doesn't really look nice for the kind of cloth billowing that I like. So I'm just going to turn that off altogether, okay? So no flexion, and you can see with a low stiffness value how this kind of billows out and kind of pulses like that. Now, since we're on the subject of this cloth kind of pulsing, if you want to dampen the springiness and the undulation that's happening as it springs out from the detractor kind of object that's going on there that's pushing and inflating the cloth, if we want to dampen that, We just got to go to our drag and maybe give it a value of like 6, and that'll slow all of that down. It will allow those springs that make up the simulation to come to a rest much faster. You can see how much faster it comes to a rest. You can see it just kind of inflates and then sticks like that, which is really cool. Maybe that's a little too slow for your taste. Maybe a value of 4. Go back to frame 0. Maybe something like that's looking good, okay? So one thing to discuss as well is this rubber, okay? Now what rubber does, again, if I just bring this very high, turns it into a rubber ducky. No, not really. But it allows the springs or the polygon edges to stretch out much further, okay? So rubber allows the cloth to stretch more. You can see that that's stretching quite a bit. Maybe we'll just give it a value of like 35, something like that. And you can see with more of the rubber percentage here, we're losing those really nice wrinkles, those nice folds that we had in there. So what we can do to add more wrinkles or folds into those little parts by where our fixed points are is to up the stiffness to say 80. And what that's going to do is, again, is increase the torsion of those springs, make them tighter, and allow for these really nice tight wrinkles to appear on our object. So now what we can do is maybe let's see what this looks like when we increase the size of how much that cloth can kind of grow out and billow out. So increasing the overall size the polygons can get with this cloth simulation. And you can see we can get some pretty cool effects. Make this billow out even more. Maybe we increase the the detractor, because now it's detracting. Maybe bring up the strength of that. And you can start to see now that because we have so much slack with this size here so high, we're starting to get some intersection. So that's, again, we can go to the Expert tab. And this is really going to slow down my scene, but turn on the self collision and you're going to see this is going to crunch through there. We're going to get some really weird rippling happening. And you're going to see, though, that we're no longer getting the intersections anymore, and we're getting more of an accurate kind of simulation, and we're getting some nicer wrinkles here, which is really, really cool, okay? So that's kind of like the egg shape here. What we can do now is say we want to take this to another level and really start to play around with what we can do with the cloth tag and maybe get a little bit more abstract than just this kind of egg shape. What I'm going to first do is just bring this size back down to a manageable number of like 125 so we don't have all that slack going on. And we can still use the same egg shape, but what I'm going to do is go to the dresser and clear out those fixed points. So now what I can do is go in here and add more points or cuts or whatever I want to do. And that's exactly what I'm thinking, is that instead of doing loop selections, maybe I can make this a little less uniform and uneven by going in, and I'm just going to go to edge mode here and just use the knife tool. So I'm going to bring up the knife tool by hitting M and K. You can see that's the line cut tool. And what I'm going to do now is uncheck this visible only. So when I cut through here, do some Freddy Krueger stuff and cut and slash through here, it's actually going to slash on the other side as well. So the back side of all those polygons. So I'm going to uncheck visible only, and I'm going to turn on this select cuts, because what I'm going to ultimately do is when I make these cuts, I want them to be selected so I can convert them to points and then again store them in a selection to use for those fixed points. I'm going to make sure that select cuts is turned on, and let's just turn down this angle to 0.1 so I don't have any like fixed angles or anything when I hit the shift key or anything like that. Okay, so now we can start Freddy Kruegering and slashing through. I'm going to slash all the way through, and you know, get kind of, depending on where you put your cuts can totally change how your cloth simulation is going to look. So kind of have fun with it. We're making happy Bob Ross slashes. I don't think Bob Ross ever did that. But there you go, got something like that. And something that I found is really cool too is if you just add a slash, what I'm going to do is hold the shift key down so this will add to the selection. And maybe just do like a slash like that. So it's like an incomplete slash, something like that. And maybe one more right there. Okay, so just kind of have fun with where you're putting your slashes and stuff like that. And now I'm going to convert this to all these edges to points. So I'm going to hold the shift key down and hit the point mode, and then you can see that those edges were converted to points. I can go to my cloth object here, go to select, set selection, and there's my slash points. Okay, I'll just rename this. Okay. And now I can go to my cloth object, go to set in the fixed points, and you'll see those will turn to purple. Now let's just see what we got. So I got my attractor in here already, so we should have some cloth billowing. And let me just go back to frame 0 because I still have my self-collision on. Let's turn that off and we'll get a faster simulation. You can see that, whoa, we got some really cool stuff going on, but we got all these purple dots kind of obscuring our view. So let's go into our dresser and uncheck that draw, and that will get rid of all of those purple dots, and we can actually see what this looks like now. So this is pretty cool. This is some pretty sexy cloth, if I do say so myself. And this is all from one attractor here. Now, what we can start to do is maybe create some multiple attractors, okay? So here's my, if I go back to my model mode, I can see where this axis center is of this point there. And if I go back to my cloth object and go to the point mode, I can see where all of those slashes are. And I can strategically kind of put these attractors, let me just hit play so I can actually see where those slashes are. I can put multiple attractors in different parts of my geometry. So maybe I want this top bit to be more billowed out or more filled with air or something like that. So be more detracted than this part right here. So what I can do is just hold Command, click and drag to duplicate this attractor and move it right there, okay? So I got an attractor right there. If I rewind, go to frame 0 and hit play, you can see that this part really billows out further than the other parts, okay? So what I can do is maybe this little bit down here, rewind, go to frame 0, Command, click and drag, maybe put an attractor down there and hit play. You can see now, if I just adjust this right like that, hit play again, you can see that this part really billows out there as well. Okay, so we got this really big billowy part right there, and this is looking really, really cool. So this is kind of a fun thing to do, is to play around with where your attractors are and how many you have, positioning them around your object. And let me just hit play so I can see, okay, that's going to be right there. Maybe push this group of polygons out further and see what that looks like. We can even go back into our cloth and start playing around with maybe some increased rubber. So this will allow the polygons to billow out further, stretch a little bit further, maybe get rid of some stiffness here. And you can see what that looks like, okay? So I think this is looking really cool. Maybe increase the size, have this kind of stretch out even more. We're getting more of those wrinkles. Again, we can increase the wrinkle amount by increasing the stiffness of those springs. And we got something looking really, really cool. Now, if you wanted to animate this or whatever, one thing that's cool is go to all your attractors and keyframe the strength of all of these attractors, kind of up, going from 0 strength to your negative 550 or whatever, and we can actually stagger the attractors as they kind of do their thing. So I'll go to the timeline and let's just stagger these keyframes here and see what kind of effect we got now. Okay, so I'll hit play, and now you can see that they're kind of staggered a little bit, which is cool. All right, and one thing I want to show that will try to prevent all this really awful looking wrinkles that's happening right here. And what that's being caused by is the size here. So if we keyframe the size percentage from 100%, which is the normal size, to this 150, we should mitigate all of those really awful looking wrinkles off the top. So if I just keyframe the size of 100 right here at frame 0, and then maybe go to frame, let's do 30, and have this size go up to that 150, set a new keyframe. Now let's see what this looks like. You can see now we kind of removed all of those awful looking wrinkles off the top, and we have something really, really nice, okay? So this is a really nice way to be able to animate this stuff coming on. Again, you can play with all your different attractors. We can even add, if you really want to get some really nice undulation going, go back to your simulate and maybe add some turbulence in here as well. So you have some nice wind kind of pushing and pulling the cloth here. Let's increase the strength here to maybe 30. And now you can start to see a little bit of something going on there. 50. Let's really crank this up. 5,000 there. That's a little bit too much. But you can see that we can get some really nice effects by adding all these particle modifiers and stuff like that. So that kind of looks nice. I don't know. There you go. So we got some really cool kind of reveals. That's with the big turbulence scale going on there. But you can get some really nice looking effects, and that size is a little bit too much. But hopefully this just kind of unlocks a whole bunch of cool things that you can do experimenting with different geometry to be able to create some really cool looking effects. Now, this is just a really weird egg shape, but one thing I can do is easily go into my dresser, clear out those fixed points. I'll turn back on that draw, but we can maybe cut some other play, or maybe even take this cloth object. If I just move this to another object, I can freely manipulate the object that it's currently on. Sometimes when you have the cloth object on, if you want to make any changes, like if I want to scale this up, you're not going to be allowed to scale it. So that's why I like to take the cloth tag off, and now you can start to play around and mess with things. And what I like to do is, to make this a little bit less like an egg shape and a little bit more organic, is to go to your sculpt, let's go to our brushes, and let's just do a grab and just start. Maybe that's a little bit too small of a size. Let's get our size up and just grab these little pieces here. So we have this looking a little bit more organic, and this is looking really cool. Let's get a smaller, whoop, not that small, a little smaller brush size, something like this. So we got some really cool kind of abstract blobby. We're ready to go to the Smithsonian with this dope ass render right here. And so now we got something completely different. Okay, let's throw back on our cloth on our object, and let's see what this looks like. You can see that our points are still intact here. And maybe let's just add one more slice. So MK, and then to add this new cut to the selection, I'm going to hold the shift key down. So there we go. Maybe something like that. And that should be added to, no. And actually what I'm doing wrong is I need to be in edge mode, okay? And then hold shift down, and then we'll just cut right through here, and then that should add to the selection. Yep, there's our new cut. So that's the kind of the gotcha with the edge cut, is we need to be in edge mode to do some edge cuts. And now we can go and again hold down shift, go back to points, and that'll add that to the point selection. We can go to that slash points again, click on that, and we'll just right over. We'll set the selection again. That'll store this selection in this tag. And now we can go back to our cloth, go to the dresser. We'll just clear it out for good measure and hit set again. There we go. And hit play. And now you can see we got some cool stuff going on now, because now we have that really organic looking shape. And now it's kind of billowing out even more. Let's get rid of those purple dots by unchecking that draw. And that's nice, if I do say so myself. That's an everyday render. You're gonna get a lot of dope ass likes from that, right? So this is, again, just, I had so much fun experimenting with where you place attractors, and maybe put one out there. Okay, so outside of the object and kind of flattens things down. Really cool stuff. Maybe even animate the attractors kind of going on in the inside. Maybe just, place a vibrate tag on that sucker. Have it go around and have some really cool stuff going on. So another cool thing you can do is, say you don't want to animate this at all. Maybe you just want to make this a still. Well, what we can do very easily is convert this to just a polygonal object with all of this cloth kind of cloth action going on. So to do that, we're just going to go into the dresser tab, hit initial state, and with that, we can then delete that cloth tag. I recommend to make a copy of your object first before you do that. And one cool thing you can do is, you can see that's just a polygonal object now. What we can do is start to use like deformers and really start getting in here and doing some cool stuff like this. Maybe add some fillet and, just playing around with how this looks now. We can now freely rotate this cloth object, stuff like that, and do all kinds of cool stuff. Maybe get an FFD, get more control. But you can see that we have a lot of flexibility now, being able to sculpt how this looks now with deformers, or even using sculpting tools or stuff like that. So I really, really encourage you to play around, and I can't wait to see what you come up with and what kind of cool stuff people will kind of show me based on this technique. And again, I mean, cloth kind of gets a bad rap because it is so old. It is a very old module that hasn't been updated in a while. But hey, just using size and playing around with the basic settings of cloth, you can get some pretty cool abstract stuff going on. But you're probably like, hey, EJ, that's cool for the dope ass likes and abstract crap, but what about some practical uses for this technique? Well, I got you covered. So let's go to a new composition here, new project, and let's maybe do some like inflated cloth or, a logo that you're going to do. Let's go to our mode text. Let's just do X because X's are cool. And let's choose something different than San Francisco. Love the town, but hate the font. Let's go and let's get the middle alignment there. So I got Rockwell extra bold. It's nice, big, chunky. I'm going to bring the depth down to 0. So it's just a flat kind of board. And again, what we're going to do is, the key is we need enough subdivisions to make some nice wrinkles in our cloth. So if I go to display garage shading lines, you're going to see that we only have an outline here so far. So what we're going to do to create more subdivisions and to make polygonal subdivisions, we don't want tries or anything like that, as best as we can avoid them. So what I'm going to do is go to caps, and in the type, I'm going to change this from n-gons to quadrangles. And if I go to regular grid, check that on, what we can do now is get a really nice grid of polygons on our text. So the width is 2 centimeters. What I'm going to do now is go to this intermediate points. You're going to see we have like all this jankiness on the edges, and what we can do to fix that is to change the intermediate points from adapted to subdivided. You can see now we subdivided the little edges here, and we're just going to max this maximum length to the width centimeters here, so 2, and now we should have a fairly, tries to be fairly symmetrical or streamlined with the rest of the edges there. Can crank up this angle all the way up to 90 degrees just in case. And now we have a really nice, highly subdivided object here. So again, for cloth to work on this and act upon it, I'm going to need to make it an editable object. So I'll hit C and we'll just go down here. Let's go to our caps and make this a single object here. So it'll just connect all the little bits here. Hit C again. There's our single polygonal object there. And now what we can do is add our cloth. So I'm going to right click, go to simulation, cloth, and let's just plug in those values that we had before. Let's get a high size strength there. And actually what I need to do first, before I start farting around with all this stuff here, is to pin and fix those points. So if I want this cloth to look, or if I want this letter to look like it's inflating, what I'm going to need to do is select all the outer points here, all the outer edges of this object. So what I'm going to do is UL to get my loop selection, and I'm going to select this select boundary loop. And what that'll allow me to do is select the boundary edges of the polygons, and that'll in effect select all of the outer edges of my type. And again, I'm going to convert this to points by holding the shift key down, hitting the point mode button. And you can see we have a bunch of points now. So now I can go into my dresser, go to fix points, boom, they're all purplified. And now I can go and hit play. And you can see that with the only thing I changed so far was the size, and I got some gravity going on. So now we just got some saggy cloth that does not look attractive at all. Let's get rid of the gravity. Now we have this kind of cool, like undulating kind of thing going on. Let's get out of a point mode. Let's get out of our garage shading lines. And we can see we have some janky polygons going on. Let's place this inside of a subdivision surface, like so. Smooth that out, smooth cloth like butter. Got some nice rippling, like nice velvety X. Yes, looking good. Oh yeah. Let's go, and now, just like we used the attractor before to make this look like this is inflating, since we're only dealing with a flat object here, instead of a attractor, I can use a different particle force like wind, and we got this big old windmill here facing the wrong direction. Let's just rotate this around 180 degrees like so. And now we got this cloth billowing in one direction, okay? So now what we can do is, since we know what some of these most important features are in here, we can maybe bring down the stiffness a little bit, get rid of the flexion. The flexion kind of looks like crap. And up the rubber percentage there, maybe 35. And this is looking really nice and ripply and wrinkly. And maybe we go and increase the drag so it kind of slows everything down a little bit. Maybe we bring the size. Maybe that's a little bit too much slack. This is a little bit too much wrinkle. Let's bring this down to like 110. And let's bring up this wind strength to maybe 10 to blow that out a little bit more. So now what you're seeing, let's go a little bit higher, maybe 15. And we can see what we got here. We got some nice ripple going on. Got some nice wrinkles. And again, so if we want more wrinkles, we just need to simply subdivide this overall text here. So let me just show you how to do that really quick. So what I'm going to do is just go into my polygon mode, select a polygon, hit Command A. Now select all those polygons there. And now what I'll do is go to, let me actually first go to my edge here. If I just go my cloth, let's go to my dresser, uncheck that. Let me just store this edge selection for now. So set selection. It's always good to store some current selections before you start subdividing. Now we can go into polygon, right click. Let me go right click so you can actually see it. Subdivide. I'm going to click on this little gear so we have some options. And I'm just going to do a subdivision of 1. And we got a lot more, double the polygons there. And if we go back to our edge mode, hopefully all of our edges are still intact, and they are. Sweet. Let's convert them to points. Let's go back. And since we have more points, we have to reset this. Okay, so we subdivided all those polygons. We have a lot more points. So we're going to clear this out. Okay, turn back drawn so we can see. And then set. And you'll see all those new points. New number of points are now purple. Turn off the draw. And let's see what this looks like now. So now we have a lot more polygons going on. And you can see now we have a lot more small wrinkles as well. And this is looking pretty bloated if you ask me. Let's bring down the width strength to maybe 10. Let's go to our cloth. And let's bring up the stiffness to about 95. And maybe something like that. So we're getting these really nice wrinkles. Maybe a little bit less rubber, maybe 20%. Because basically what I want to do is bring back some of these little wrinkles here. So what that's being caused by is too much stretching on our object. So the rubber will prevent the cloth to stretch all that much. And now you'll see we're getting some really nice wrinkles going on there. Really, really nice stuff. So now that we got this nice pillowy kind of text going on, we get this really nice wrinkles on the bottom there. Looking really nice. I think I actually liked it before we subdivided a little bit there, but oh well. But now that we have this in a point that we like, what if you just wanted to do this as a still and not actually animate this? Well, to be able to just store this polygonal state of this cloth, what I'm going to do first is just command click and drag to duplicate this whole setup. So we have a little backup copy. Always good to have a backup to save yourself from yourself in case you screw this up. You can always go back to this old version. And then I'll just turn off the subdivision surface here. And I'm going to go to my cloth. And what I'm going to do is in my dresser, I'm going to go to initial state and hit set. Now what this is going to do is store this cloth deformation as it is at this current frame. And now what I can do is just totally delete the cloth altogether. And now you can see that, hey, there's our cloth in that state that we stored that initial state at. Now we can do whatever the heck we want with this now. So now I can go and let me grab, say, a symmetry. I'm going to select the X, go to my symmetry here, hold the Alt or Option key down to make that a child. And let's change the mirror plane to the correct mirror plane, which is going to be XZX. No. It's always something different than you think. All right, XY. There we go. And now we got this nice kind of pillow look because we just have the symmetry on the other side, and it looks like an inflated kind of balloon, which is really cool. All right. So that's one nice use for it, a practical use for it. Another one is just a plain old boring pillow. Let's go to a new project. So let's go and let's grab a cube and let's just make this a fairly skinny cube, maybe 4 centimeters in the Y. And let's up the segments here. Again, the more segments, the nicer, smaller little folds and creases we're gonna get. And let's just go ahead and make that editable by hitting C. And let's go to our edge mode, do a loop selection UL, grab that little loop selection there, hold shift, convert those to points. And so we got our point selection, just add our simulation tag cloth. Let's fix those points, they're all purple now. Let's go to our forces, again, zero out the gravity. And let's just see what this looks like with an inflation of say 110 size. And you're gonna see we got some nice rippling going on. Nothing too pillowy looking yet. Let's go ahead and again add our particle force, our attractor. Let's turn it into a detractor beam. Detractor beams, negative 3,500, something like that. Now we got this wacky, wild, inflatable pillow guy. And what we're going to do now is kind of mess around with all of these options here. So right now we have too much stuff going on. Even though our stiffness is at 100%, we still have a lot of wacky stuff going on. So what we're going to do is, since stiffness is at 100%, can't go much higher than that, right? Can't go higher than 100%. But with the iterations here, we can actually kind of amplify or multiply the effect of the stiffness and all that good stuff. So if I increase this even more, you can see that that's actually stiffening and everything. It's kind of exponentially increasing the values that we currently have here. So even if we can't go up above 100% here, we can still increase the effect of all of these options here by upping the iterations, okay? So now we have this kind of stiff little janky looking thing here. What we're going to do now is just subdivide this, throw this cube into a subdivision surface, holding Alt or Option. There we go, nice and smooth. And now we can start playing around with some of our other options here. So maybe we bring the flexion down. Again, flexion, don't like flexion, not a fan of flexion. Maybe increase the rubber a little bit. Maybe something like this. Maybe increase the iterations even more. And you can notice when I increase the iterations, we're getting more and more of these really nice wrinkles going on, which is nice. Maybe add a little bit of drag and see what that looks like as well. And you're going to see that we have these intersecting bits right there, okay? Don't like the intersecting bits, not a fan of intersecting bits. Let's bring the iterations down. So to get rid of those intersecting bits, we're going to go to Expert, turn on that self-collision again. We're going to go back to frame 0 and hit play, and hopefully that should fix some of this. And sometimes what you need to do is also increase the point collision kind of boundaries. So let me just increase that to about 4 centimeters, and maybe that'll help. That didn't look like it did all that much there either. Maybe increase the sampling, the subsampling, maybe to 5. And basically what that's doing is kind of, when you have fast objects colliding, it increases the subdivision samples of the cloth simulation. Obviously that's not working, so sometimes what we need to do is maybe make this cube a little bit thicker. So again, what I'm going to do is remove that cloth tag. Let's just go and scale this up ever so slightly, something like that. And we're going to apply that cloth tag again. And what you're going to notice is that when we go to the cloth tag, we go to our fixed points, you're not going to see any fixed points, so I'll have to set it again. Once you remove that cloth tag and apply it back, you'll need to reset your points. Now let's hit play. And hopefully, that should hopefully prevent some of our intersecting going on. And it didn't, but that's all good. That's fine. We'll fix it in post. Fix it in post. So there's a nice little pillow. Let's just say we're kind of happy with what that's looking like right now. Actually, let's just increase the detractor strength to, let's try 5,500. Maybe that'll help with some of those little pesky edges there. Yeah, it's kind of helping. Let's do 6,500. And let's go back to frame 0. And we're still having that issue. All right, well, that's fine. That's totally fine. Totally planned for this. Let's just escape to hit to stop this playback. And what we're going to do is we're going to just say, you know what, this is fine. Everything's fine here now. Thank you. And we're going to hit initial state set. And that will allow us to store the current state that these polygons are at. And we can safely delete that cloth tag. And now we can start to work on these crappy intersected little edges there. And this is where the sculpting tools will come in handy. If I go to my cube here, go to sculpt, let's grab our smooth tool and just smooth this edge out. Smooth that edge out. You set it and forget it. We're just smoothing everything out. But now you see they're really just flat edges, and that looks kind of crappy. So what we're going to do, go back to go back to sculpt. I almost said go back to school. Don't want to do that. Let's go to inflate, and we'll just inflate this little edge there. Something like that. Inflate this little edge here. Bloop. And inflate here. And inflate over there. And there we go. We got, you know, we can go maybe, let's do a little pinchy. Do a little pinch. And maybe pinch this little bit out there. So you can have, I mean, you can just sculpt forever. I love the sculpting tools inside of Cinema 4D. Have a lot of fun with them. You can see that, you know, I could fine tune this a lot better, but there's a pillow, fairly easy with all the cloth simulations and the attractor and all that stuff. So you can see in our little journey we had here, there is a lot of stuff you can do with just utilizing the cloth tag and just a few simple options like your iterations, your stiffness, the rubber. Remember, flexion sucks. Don't use flexion. Using that size, the size is huge. It allows for these really nice billowing of your polygons, and then again adding all of your particle forces, your detractors that are expelling out and kind of showing this nice inflation kind of look, and looking really good. And again, it's very easy to set up, very easy to iterate off of and experiment with. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up with this simple cloth inflation technique. All right, so hopefully now you realize that cloth is actually kind of cool. It's old, but it's all about dusting off some old features, figuring out what cool stuff you can do with them, and kind of use them to their strengths. So if you have any questions about cloth or anything I did in this tutorial, please leave them in the comment section below. If you make anything with this technique, and I can't wait to see what you come up with, be sure to tag me on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, all of the interwebs. Love to see what you're coming up with and what you're creating. So always tag me. I love commenting and seeing what you're doing. And if you like this tutorial and you want to see more cloth or whatever else you want to see tutorials wise in the future from me, be sure to leave them in the comment section below. And if you like this tutorial, be sure to like it. Be sure to ding that little dinger bell thing so you can get alerted to my new tutorials right away when I post them. And I really appreciate that, and really appreciate you watching my tutorials. And I'll be sure to come out with more in the very near future. I'll see you then. Bye, everybody.